Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today to Confidence Through Competence, How to Shift Your Mindset and Use IPAWS with Authority. My name is Troy Harper, and I'll be the moderator today. A few notes for orientation. Today's session will be recorded and made available for all participants in the coming weeks. This event is an interactive session, and we'll be taking a few surveys throughout the event. We'd really love everyone's participation, and remember, your participation is always anonymous. On top of your console, you'll see a links tab that contains the relevant content from today's session. And there's also a Q&A option on the console where you can submit your questions or comments as we proceed through the webinar today. When a disaster strikes, government officials really need to send clear, precise, and timely emergency alerts through IPAWS. However, many officials lack the soft skills and confidence needed to press the send button. The fear of making a mistake and hesitation in using IPAWS leads to far too many instances where an alert goes out either too late or not at all, which really results in a greater risk to lives, risk to property damage, and environmental concerns. The secret to overcoming fear and uncertainty is really shifting your mindset and learning to fear interaction rather than mistakes. Government officials can build confidence through competence and learn to stop hesitating during an emergency. During today's webinar, our alerting experts will discuss how to use IPAWS successfully and with authority, best practices for comprehensive emergency alerting, how to create muscle memory through training and education, and the importance of continuous improvement and learning from mistakes. So let's get started and introduce our panel and esteemed colleagues. I'm Troy Harper. I'm the Vice President of Public Sector for OnSolve, and I've spent 20 years in public safety emergency management. And I've been with OnSolve for 10 years, specializing in alert technology. Joining me is Mr. Pete Gaynor, Vice President of Resiliency and Disaster Recovery at Hill International, and Eddie Bertola, founder of Bertola Advisory Services. Pete, will you introduce yourself, sir?
Yep, thanks, Troy, and thanks, Eddie. Good to be here with you today. I want to thank the OnSolve team for this webinar, and most importantly for the guide. I think it's a really great resource, so I want to thank you publicly for that. Like Troy said, I work for Hill International doing program management and construction management for complex disaster recovery. And probably most of you know me from my previous position as the FEMA administrator during the last presidential administration. But I also have both local and state emergency management experience. I was a local emergency manager in the city of Providence and the state director in the state of Rhode Island. And prior to that, a U.S. Marine. So it's good to be here with the team.
Thank you for your service, Pete, as always. And
thank you,
also
Troy.
joining us, Eddie Bertola. Eddie?
Well, I think it's good to be here with everybody, and it's nice to see you, Troy and Pete. And just again, a thank you for that guide. It's something that I think we've been waiting for a while. I have recently retired and moved from the California Highway Patrol, where I was for almost 16 years, and was one of those in charge of sending alerts statewide throughout for all the missing and endangered person alerts and different types, which as we talk about different alerts, I know that's definitely a gray area right now with all the increase that we see in the different alerting types that are out there. I was able to leverage that and become a national instructor for the Amber Alert program for missing and endangered person alerts. I've been lucky enough to meet many of you throughout the nation. I've taught in all the different 50 states and internationally as well, and really focusing on you, where the rubber meets the road, and how to just be more effective in alerting. I'm also lucky enough to be talking to you from the Technical Support Services Facility, which is a FEMA IPAWS building. It's a place where anyone can call and get immediate assistance when you are sending out or creating an alert. And I really enjoy the partnership that I have with IPAWS. And honestly, I'm just excited for this document, but for this conversation as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Eddie, very much. And so there's two groups of people, those who already know Eddie and those who will be meeting him soon, I'm quite sure, with his engagement and involvement with FEMA, and really the evolution of assisting IPAWS, DHS, FEMA IPAWS team to continue to evolve and be better for all of us, for the residents that we serve, and the greater good. These gentlemen are experienced and trusted advisors on alerting technology and innovation really throughout the nation and beyond. And we're honored for your participation today. So thank you for being here. And also today, as both referenced, OnSolve is proud to announce the release of our comprehensive guide titled In Control, a guide to navigating emergency alerting with authority and precision. Really, how to stop hesitating and learn to use IPAWS with confidence. This guide was a collaborative effort between OnSolve and your panelists today, and it's now available for you. We will talk more about the guide on today's session. And so let's go ahead and get started with the session. What is IPAWS? Well, we didn't want to start so basic, but we also didn't want to start with any confusion. And we want to make sure that we are starting from the exact same foundation. Obviously, there's a pretty basic and simple explanation by FEMA of what IPAWS is. But Eddie, I think there's probably a more simplistic definition. How would you categorize IPAWS?
No, I think that's a great question. And if you've ever been asked by an official or anybody else or your next door neighbor, you know, what is IPAWS? Sometimes you think, how deep do I want to go into this? But simply put, Troy, it's the ability to have emergency communication with the public. And it is a federal program that facilitates these efforts. There are multiple tools and resources that are at the disposal of emergency managers, emergency communicators, to be able to leverage technology with that end in mind to get communication out to the public. And I think we'll talk about some of those different things today throughout this discussion. But it's a very powerful tool, but it's one that you have the ability to use to really save lives and impact events in your area.
Absolutely. The evolution of what originally started as an outdoor warning to the emergency broadcast system to IPAWS and the current iteration and the planned future iterations has really evolved and has become a better, bigger, and almost required tool for so many to have as part of their preparedness and response activities. Let's ask the audience something very quickly. So this is part of the interaction. This is a webinar that you don't just put on the corner screen and do something else. We're asking you to be engaged. And we're going to share the results. This is information for you. So the first question is, have you personally sent an IPAWS alert in the live environment in the last 12 months? And there's 4 answers here. It should pop up on your screen here in just a second. You'll be able to actually submit your answer. And the answers are yes, no. I don't have IPAWS, which is a completely okay answer. There's probably quite a few reasons you wouldn't have IPAWS. And I don't know. Eddie, you see a lot of the statistics. You work with FEMA on the numbers at IPAWS. We've obviously watched a continued evolution and growth with the participation, the required weekly test, the required monthly test activity. Any guess here on our audience and where this may fall?
Well, I'm going to hope it's higher than national trends. And again, we're going to talk about how wonderful this tool can be if it's in the right hands, right? But we have currently it's over 50% of registered alerting authorities, so they have access to IPAWS, don't use it every year. And so I'd love to see if there's, if that's different. And I'm hoping those here have used it. And it's funny, Troy and Pete, we never want, I hope you've used it, because if you've used it, that means there's an emergency situation. So I'm not endorsing or hoping that there are emergencies out there. But in some of the guides that OnSolve has put on and that you just open the news, there are situations out there that are happening all the time that could benefit from this type of communication.
I couldn't agree more. And as a former user of alerting technology on behalf of a local government, it's one of those things that we've got to engage IPAWS as a true public safety tool. It's not just a communication tool. It's no different than the things law enforcement uses in their cadre of tools to prevent and detect. It's no different than what our brethren and sisters in firefighting use as well. And so IPAWS is just one of those very, very powerful tools. Yeah. Let's see if we have responses here, and it looks like 56% have said no. It's going to take a second to finish populating out, but yeah, 17% yes, 56.5% no on sending a live alert. Now, doesn't mean they're not testing. Doesn't mean they have access. So to your point, Eddie, hopefully those are communities that don't have a disaster or haven't had a disaster. Pete, anything surprising here for you, sir?
Yeah, no, and maybe maybe that's the problem, right? Typically, first of all, as an emergency manager, no matter what level you're at, so whether at the federal level or state, local, tribes, territories, from my point of view, I haven't served in every level of government. This is really the emergency manager's most important life-saving tool there is. Yeah, you can send out fire and police to do life saving, but when you talk about how you impact the majority of your residents, your constituents, in whatever jurisdiction you have, and that you can influence their decisions, their actions, this is the tool, right? I think part of the challenge is that for the most part, this tool is locked behind closed doors, right? It's probably in an EOC IT closet, or it's in some place that's off limits. Even if you work within a emergency management program, it's probably the other guy that knows how to do it, not you. And I think our point today is, if you run an emergency management program, everybody needs to know how to launch this, right? Because someday it may be you, and you may not be the director, but it may be you. So you really have to become familiar with this because, again, it is your most important life-saving tool.
I couldn't agree more, Pete. And I'll add one word to that. The certified, credentialed launcher. We've seen folks launch without proper training, and obviously some of those things make national news, and that's another impact to local officials as well. But we talk about disasters. OnSolve as a whole has gone out and surveyed quite a large audience each year that we participate in and analyze the risk intelligence data from our Global Risk Insights report. And it's pretty interesting because in this year, we actually asked state and local public safety officials the same questions that we asked in previous years of our commercial and enterprise folks. And it's really surprising that that 100% of them had experienced really a direct impact for physical threats. Now, physical threats in this categorization are really everything that's cyber, right? Anything that's man-made, physical, or weather-related, et cetera. But 100% of them in the last 24 months had felt that impact. And 99% said they indirectly experienced those threats in the last 24 months. And so that full report is also available at onsolve.com if anybody wants to read it. There's a lot of good content in there. But that just really helps us keep our finger on the pulse of what's occurring nationwide and what we're seeing beyond what we're seeing on the news, beyond what we read in our annual reports, our after-action reports. And it really, I think, just comes to prove that disasters happen every day, everywhere. And if you haven't had yours yet, obviously we're all part of COVID, but there's so many other things out there that necessitate the need for community alerting and public warning. And emergencies will happen. And emergency managers really have two goals when a disaster strikes: protect the lives, to minimize property and to minimize the loss of life and property damage. And so, Eddie, we've watched now 7,000 wireless emergency alerts issued through IPAWS, which is astounding, and I hope it continues to grow and grow. But there's a number of instances where these life-saving messages were never sent, or they were late. What are some of the reasons you think that that's occurring, and how can we get a little bit better on that?
No, great question. It's interesting. One of the numbers on the last poll was that about 24% of each of you said that you don't have IPAWS. And what we're seeing is we have this, dramatic increase year over year, month after month, week after week of entities utilizing this tool. And so the question, that I keep thinking that many of us consider is, well, why aren't more people? IPAWS and the tools and resources honestly belong in every emergency and instance. How they're used is different. What we have seen is training and education. Those are usually the two big things that come up is, someone who does not send an alert They, you can talk to them. The media will talk to them. Your bosses will talk to you, right? It's why. And, we talk about this four-letter word that begins with an F, right? And ends with ear. So it's fear. But it's that thought of that hesitation before I send, and you think all these different things. So even if you have the tool, um, it's that confidence that just isn't there. Uh, and thankfully, though, that is getting better, and we see more and more people sending out alerts that are more effective, better quality. But there's still that contingent, that large group that have the tool, because on that poll, 17% have done it, but the vast majority have not used it. And it's not because there aren't emergencies.
And Eddie, if I can just jump in a little bit on the 24% that don't have IPAWS. So if you're one of those 24% that don't have it, I hope you know why you don't have it. And if you want it, you should contact the state in which you're in and ask for it. And if that's not satisfactory, maybe you need to call Eddie to figure out how you get IPAWS in your jurisdiction. For me, as the former FEMA administrator, every single emergency management program covering 100% of the nation should have access to IPAWS. That's my belief, and for those that don't have it, you need to get it.
What perfectly stated, Pete. Yeah.
Because now we're going to go back and forth, Troy. Here's the fun part, right?
Please, love it.
I absolutely agree. I came from the most populous state in the nation, California. There are, alerting authorities and people who can do this in every county, and it's wonderful. And the team that I worked with was well trained, and it was very effective. We didn't know everything, right? But we were doing the very best we could. And now I've moved, and here's my shout out to Pea Ridge, Arkansas. You can look it up. It is a small town in Northwest Arkansas, and that's where, I now live. And the mayor has bought on to that principle, as Pete was talking about. He understands that all emergencies are local, right? It takes that local effort. And our small community is now starting that process to become an alerting authority, because that's who needs it. It's, the community representative. So to push on what Pete said even farther, if you aren't sure, then you need to reach out and ask somebody.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's jump into another survey here. So as participants here today, what is your comfort level with IPAWS alerts? Obviously that evolves. I can say as a former IPAWS user, I've had my own fear, as Eddie said. And we'll give everyone some time here to determine if you're comfortable with it and you're an expert. Really curious to see how many experts we have out there. Eddie, you maybe have a handful there. You're comfortable enough, although it causes anxiety. We maybe should have replaced the word anxiety with fear, because you should always be a little fearful of it. That keeps you in line, keeps you in check, obviously. And not comfortable. Don't feel like you know enough. Be curious to see what comes in there. And then, rather have a root canal or vacation with the in-laws. Be curious to see how many we have on that one. So it looks like we're getting there. More than half of you have answered. So if you're taking a phone call or typing up a paper, take a pause, look at your screen, and help us out by answering what your comfort level is with IPAWS. Just a quick note, guys, on the last conversation, something we talked about, IPAWS is an absolute necessity, but it should be added on to your daily preparedness. It should be part of what you preach and teach to your citizens, your community, your constituents, your elected officials every day, along with all the other alerting tools, how they get general information. As much as you talk about your website, Twitter, Facebook feed, whatever other public engagement you're using, IPAWS should be exactly part of that conversation. Everyone's received these IPAWS alerts, whether through the national testing, through the AMBER program, or other regional alerts that may have been sent. So we've got a pretty good percentage. Yeah, Pete, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so if you don't know where to start, right? If you don't know where to start to build your program, And I'm gonna highlight the need and the value in the guide that we just built. In the guide, because every emergency manager likes a checklist. There's a checklist about how to prepare, how to launch, how to test, how to do an after action. A great checklist to follow that will get you, and help you with your confidence and competence when you have to launch that alert. So make sure before you leave you download the guide because it has a starter kit in here to get you on the right track.
Yeah, the guide is amazing. Everyone, whether you are authorized to have IPAWS or not, if you create any messaging to anyone for any reason, there's a lot of good content in that guide. So let's see what our results reveal here. Well, we'll start at the bottom, right? 2% would rather have a root canal, and I can understand that. Maybe even able to call them out by name, but I won't. Just kidding. Kind of split right there in the middle, guys. 88%, almost 90%. Comfortable enough or not comfortable. That's really the break point between fear and the not enough confidence or competence. I would say that unlikely to actually trigger it. And that's going to cause a delay. When it matters most, when you need it to create and send the IPAWS, that's going to cause a significant delay. So, Eddie, any surprises?
I'm not necessarily surprised. I think it's interesting because sometimes we either have too much confidence in ourselves or not enough, right? And whenever I talk and train, I'll usually ask a similar question and say, by a show of hands, how many of you feel that you could do it? Okay, a lot of people raise their hand, and I said, perfect. I have a computer right here. I want you to send it out right now. Go. And then that's a different story, right? Because that's not on our terms. And so many times we practice and go through this on our terms when, we've had our drink in the morning and I'm ready to sit down and I'm going through a practice. When in many real situations, it is not like that. It's late at night, or when we have so many other things going, it's a chaotic situation. And then you get the call or notification, send it out. And it takes a different level of comfort to be able to do that effectively.
And Eddie, I like your the example that you use, because as a state director in Rhode Island, I did the same thing. I would do unannounced drills of sending an alert, right? So you can say that I'm comfortable enough, right? But when it's time for you to go do it in the moment, without any preparation, without any written procedures, it's a whole different story. And I can still see my staff when I told them, okay, we're all going into launch a test, the blood drained from their faces as they knew it was testing time. But that's exactly the point, right? You have to be comfortable in doing it, at a moment's notice and by yourself. So, yeah.
We have a bunch of people listening to this webinar now that are hoping their supervisor doesn't hear what you just said, and they're going to say,
I hope they do.
Pete Gaynor recommended that we do these surprise checks. And
yeah. So yes, I do recommend that. So buckle up if you haven't been tested.
That's right.
Pre-dawn unannounced, right? It's there's nothing wrong with that once in a while. So I think the message here is for everyone on the call or listening later, you're not alone. We've all been there. I myself, in issuing a public alert, deciding the content and are we over alerting or under alerting, or is the message right? Is it good? Is it perfect? Trying to build perfection out of it. Quickly realized that the dozen people sitting around a conference table trying to come up with the content and the specifications was continuing to risk more lives as the emergency evolved. And although this was 15 years ago, that still happens today. And Eddie, I know you've watched some. There's use cases that we've all seen of underuse, overuse. Nothing malicious, fortunately, that I'm aware of. But if you're not comfortable with IPAWS, again, you're not alone. So, Eddie, any real world anecdotes here and
I tell you, I wish I could get everybody to understand this, because unfortunately with the media and others, sometimes you're put in that box where you feel alone and you feel like it's all resting on your shoulders, when in reality you have resources available to help you. I'm actually, as I said before, I'm sitting in one of the offices of a training center that is here to offer 24/7 assistance. And the last thing that any of us in this field want is for you to have this feeling of isolation, because that does not breed good decision making. You need to be able to reach out and talk to your partners, fellow stakeholders. It's always best to do it before the incident, but even if you are neck deep in something, uh, reach out and just get that assistance. So as far as uh, yeah, we have a few different examples of people who have either sent errant alerts, or even worse than an errant alert is not sending one at all. They just get that lockup. And unfortunately, with a lot of the missing and endangered person um, alerting that I'm involved in specifically, um, we have people who've been recovered deceased. And, we're never trying to say that, well, if an alert went out, the person would have been recovered safely. But I can tell you from experience, it is much easier to work through that situation knowing that you have done absolutely everything that you could have done, versus trying to think, should I have? I'm not sure, and just going back and forth. So reach out. Other people have been and are currently walking through the same trenches you are, so you're not alone.
And
So true.
Eddie, just let me try to put some perspective on this a little bit. So it's like, so we know that there's fear out there of launching these alerts, and I want to put it into context. So yes, there is fear by probably all of us to launch an alert because it goes to the wrong location, the wrong message, all those things that can happen. But I think, and I speak for myself, my bigger fear was that if I didn't launch in time, I didn't launch with the right message, that I would be as the director, as the state director, the local director, I would be responsible for someone's life that I could have saved, right? And it may sound like over the top, but what did I fear more? I feared that. So launching the alert was lower on the scale. So if you're out there and you're like, how do I weigh this out? It's really about, okay, it could go bad, but if you train, you're going to minimize and mitigate all those things. But what is the thing that could really go bad? It's like a failed launch or a launch that doesn't happen. It's you're going to be able to save lives, and that's how you need to weigh this out.
Yeah.
To me, it's simple.
And I don't want to give the impression to anybody that, well, Eddie Bertola has, never made mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes.
Oh, yeah,
I've learned some really important lessons doing this. And I don't think perfection is something that we are, saying that has to happen. But it's much easier to defend an action rather than an inaction. And sometimes I've seen paralysis occur when people are waiting to get it perfect, when they're trying to adjust things just right. And you need care, and we need to be good stewards of this tool. But when they're trying to wordsmith something and over and over again, and then the need for the alert.
The clock is ticking.
Yeah,
the clock is ticking. And this business is an imperfect business, right? It's an imperfect business. So if you get around that, then hopefully it's a little bit easier to take action.
When you look at the after action reports of some of the largest incidents over the last 4 or 5 years, usually by the time the first IPAWS message was sent, in reality, the third or fourth update should have been sent. There should have been the initial push of information. Again, it's not going to be perfect out of the gate. It's but get it out of the gate, get the folks alerted. And there's also and every FEMA administrator has really said this over the years, and that is there's a self-preparedness that the citizens have to be educated on, that we may not be able to get you everything you need as public safety officials when it matters the most. We're going to give it every try we have, right? And obviously part of emergency management public safety is teaching and training folks to be self-sufficient, to be aware of their surroundings and things like that. Let's take another survey, guys. Let's go a quick poll. So what's preventing you from pushing the button? Is it a lack of training? Is it micromanagement by leaders, which could be direct management or elected officials, maybe even state officials? Is it a prior negative experience, right? The this failed once, or I failed once, I don't want to do it again. We call that the RGE, right? The resume generating event. Is it budget or liability concerns? Liability is a big word, as we just talked about, not using it versus potential misuse or over alerting. And then stress, confusion during the emergency. I will say on the last one there, the Unsolved Code Red tool, we've spent a lot of time and effort and money really looking at how human interaction works, right? The cognitive load during an emergency, when you need to create, craft, or hopefully you've already thought through all those things. You've got the templates built, you've built the messages, you've thought through if it's a fire, if it's a flood, if it's an earthquake, a tornado, hurricane, an active shooter, whatever it may be. But that stress and confusion is real, and we don't want to add additional burden on whether, again, it's a dispatcher, whether it's an emergency manager, whether it's somebody sitting in a watch center. We want it to be very, very efficient. So, Pete,
I think that's,
hitting the button.
I
Yeah,
think,
Eddie, go ahead.
well, as I'm jumping in here, it's probably
Please.
even a bunch of these. You know, I know we're asking you to pick like the one that is the most prevalent in your area, but there's probably a combination. Or you've dealt with one, you fixed that one, now you're dealing with another one. And there are probably a lot of forces that are working to prevent you from pushing that button. But that's why, as we talk about, you know, the confidence through competence, you need to be that much stronger so that you can work through all of these barriers.
And a reminder, none of your information, all we see is the percentages. So be open and honest. We're not going to call your boss or your elected officials and tell them the results. This is an informal survey for this audience only, and it is enlightening. It helps us in real time really see what our audience is engaged with. Pete,
do we want to make
a
prediction on? Do we want to make a prediction on what it's going to be? Do we want to make
wow.
I'm gonna say it's going to be training. That's going to be my prediction. Yep.
I think that will be the lead. We'll give it just another few seconds here to make sure folks are finding the screen. Not to influence
anybody's vote, though.
Well, no, I can say that, as I said, I've probably experienced all of these, and I say probably, I know I have. Yeah. You know, prior negative experiences. You know, there's a reason why you don't touch a hot stove over and over, because you've learned, but those can develop into training scars that you have to actively work through. You know, that's why, you know, people bring up Hawaii. I had so many conversations with potential alerting authorities who referenced the Hawaii ballistic missile threat. And not only was that a few years ago, but they're just like, well, we don't want that. And I said, well, again, we work through that. And Hawaii has become so much better because of that. And honestly, the entire program's improved because of negative experiences. That's one of the ways that we can identify issues in a process or different steps that we need to take to, you know, make the system more secure, more robust, more accurate, and it really helps the whole ecosystem of alerting grow.
Agreed. And as a reminder, put your questions in the Q&A. I'm seeing quite a few questions fall in, and I'm giving a preview of them. They're actually really good. So hopefully we'll leave a time at the end to get to those live for everyone. Pretty good results coming up here. Let's take a look.
Hey,
you guys nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4% on budget concerns. You know, 5%. That's a little concerning. I'm sure the communities are still buying park benches and doing other great things for the community, but these life safety tools have to go to the top. And obviously, reaching out to folks like Eddie or Peter, myself, we can help you with that talk track and convincing your agency or municipality or city, county, state on why this is so important.
Well, Troy, to that 4%, I know there was one thing that I didn't understand until I was, you know, in the game a lot more. I went with the whole Hollywood route that this was going to cost my little city millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? And it wasn't until I actually started looking into it that there are a lot of very affordable options for large or small cities.
Yeah, serving almost 10,000 government agencies nationwide and very many of the IPAWS COGS nationwide. I will tell you that the entry level for an IPAWS only system is very affordable by any size agency. Very affordable. Yeah. 54.8%, Pete. What do you think?
Yep. I was gonna say not to undercut Onsolve or Eddie's business, but you can get free technical assistance from the IPAWS team, right?
Okay.
Free. If you're not really sure what to do, where to go, you have no budget, FEMA, the IPAWS team, go through your FEMA region and ask for some technical assistance. They'll come out and give you some guidance about how to approach it. So I just wanted to mention that.
Absolutely. Any surprise on the 54.8% there, lack of training, Pete? I think you predicted that. You may have
No,
influenced
no,
it.
I think this is, yeah, I may have, but I think this is why we wrote the guide, right? We sense that there's a problem, and the problem is if you don't train enough, if you're not familiar enough with, and whatever it is, right, you're not going to have the confidence to launch it. So more confidence, right? That's the essence of the guide. So for you 54.8 out there, and probably others too, because you probably have a little bit of training need. The guide is a great place to start to build your way. Not a surprise. Training is probably at the root of a lot of things. Being behind the locked door is probably a problem for IPAWS, right? You don't see it every day. You don't touch it every day. You only break it out in an emergency, right? There's all those things that go to this training issue.
Yeah, and remember to go back to the last slide, you're not alone. There are a lot of resources,
Yeah.
neighboring communities, your state, FEMA, and the folks on this call all willing to help. No one's alone in this boat. So ironically, though, this is really about fear, right? It's really been the main crux of all the responses for all the polls that we've taken so far. So let's take a little bit of a closer look here. Let's kind of dig into some of the reasons of fear, right? It's simply haven't used it before, lack of knowledge and training, or hesitation, bad experience, the oops factor. I don't want to be the next oops. I don't want to be the next, or my elected officials don't allow me. I saw someone comment earlier on they only use it for minor emergencies, which that's a local decision, right? We've seen agencies just set the bar, but what is a minor? Where's the break point between that? Minor emergencies can still be a threat to life and property. I've seen some agencies in South Texas, because they have such other challenges of communication to the staff, use IPAWS for boil water notices because it's the best way to get it, and it is just the way that the configuration of the lay of the land there. So those are all local decisions endorsed by the state and managed by the state up to FEMA. But Eddie, where do we go from here? Like the hesitation, this is a result of paralysis. A lot of worry about consequences and somebody losing their job over a serious mistake. What's the next steps to get out of this and change these numbers on our next webinar?
I think one of the big things is to do what Pete mentioned, reach out to your IPAWS connections. Reach out and talk to them, get that training. You can get one-on-one training, you can get group training, and put these things into practice. Educate or offer education to your managers, to those executive or executive level individuals that you deal with, so that they can have a better understanding. You are going to find it harder and harder to have success in this when the only time you tap into these tools is during the emergency. You need to be incorporating this into training and exercises. Because, and again, that's just one of the best ways to battle fear. It's fear of the unknown, fear of unintended consequence, fear of, I think you said it really well, Troy, am I going to lose my job? And I will go back to one thing that was said before. It's much easier to defend an action rather than an inaction. And if you can defend and say, this is what was happening, I sent this out because I felt that it was in, the public need, I'll defend that all day long, versus
Hey,
I just got worried.
Yeah. Hey, let me just put maybe a little context into this. What is IPAWS? IPAWS is a information delivery system, right? It's a way that, the federal government, local government is going to deliver critical information to its residents, to its taxpayers, to its constituents. And why do we do that? Because first of all, as emergency manager, I don't want to have to make decisions for a million people, right? It's impractical. It never works. But I want to give them information that allows my resident to make good decisions for themselves, right? It relieves the burden of emergency managers if you put good information out there, actionable information that the populace can use to make good decisions, to make the crisis, the emergency, the disaster a little bit better, right? So again, that's all it is. I don't. Sometimes I think we fear IPAWS because it's a little black box and we fully don't understand it. But what it really is your way to deliver critical information, in the moment, right? So, you want to enable your population, your citizens, to make good decisions for themselves. It helps you do your job better. So use the tool.
And it shows your citizens that you're engaged, right? That you're managing the incident and you're aware. They're not expecting every answer to be perfect or right. It's an evolving emergency. It's why they're called emergency. So couldn't agree more. Let's do one more poll, guys. And promise for the audience, this is the last one, but I think it's really important. If you have sent an IPAWS alert, have you second guessed yourself or been second guessed by someone else? And it's interesting when we talk about this, the content changed before I could hit the send button. So, or the event was over, so I didn't send it. Who's going to question that? Obviously, those things will generate after follow-up discussion. But yes, second guess myself. Yes, someone of a higher chain, or no, I sent the alert without hesitation. Let's see and get some folks going in there. And again, you're anonymous, so 3 answers here. You only pick one. If you have sent an IPAWS alert, were you second guessed by yourself or someone else? Eddie, how many times when you hit the button did you, obviously there's a validation checkpoint, the gut check before and after. It's like anything that goes that wide and far, but how often did you have that second guess?
Once I became confident in the system, I rarely second guessed myself. I understood the tool, started using the tool. Almost always, if not 110% of the time, someone called me about it, right? Higher up the chain. Hey, what's going on? And it really is because of the competency level in the system. They didn't understand, or it's the Pete thing. Well, you just activated this black box, and actually it's not a black box, right? But the system, are you sure? Are you okay? And once you explain and help them understand that you're really providing the public with emergency communication that they need to make better decisions for themselves, right? Providing them actionable information. That second guess from somebody else higher up the chain ends up becoming support. And they're like, well, good. That's what I would hope you would do for it. I remember a specific instance while we're waiting just for a second. It was in 2019. I actually remember the dates. I'll just say it was in October, but we had 3 Amber Alerts in a 24-hour period. That's never a good day. That means that there are, kids definitely in danger. And I had some newer people that were working, and I got a call, and they said, "Hey, not really sure, should we?" And it was like, absolutely. And I drove in my car. I was actually very close to the place and went there and walked up to that computer and hit that button and said, yes, like we need to have more confidence. And I mean, it's just, they ended up understanding more. So it's something that does happen. But have confidence in this system that FEMA, and IPAWS specifically have spent so much time developing this, and they still are making it robust, resilient, to provide that continuity of communications.
Yeah, and it's not your only tool to communicate. This is the farthest reaching tool to hit all those devices, whether they've registered for your local mass notification solution, whether they're just visiting from out of town, whether they work in your community and live somewhere else. So let's take a look and see what we got here on the responses. Sent without hesitation. I like that. It's not the largest, number I'd like to see on there, but it's a good start. It's a great start. 40% second guessing themselves. I think we've covered probably most of the whys. And higher chain of command has questioned it. So I'm going to guess that's probably outside of your public safety field, or even an elected official who maybe needs some additional education. And again, we can help with that. Reach out to FEMA IPAWS, reach out to the providers, reach out to the experts. There's a lot of documentation on the benefits and risks of using or not using IPAWS. It's not a perfect science. There's limitations to it. The technology, there's limitation in the number of characters. But right now, it's the best tool to throw that blanket in conjunction with your mass notification tool to get that emergency message out there. Guys, any surprises here?
No, but I would just say on the, someone in higher chain of command questioned me. So I would maybe, if that happened to you, I would maybe examine that a little bit more. Like, why did that happen? Is it because your elected leader or your boss was not familiar with it? Was it a surprise to them? I would examine that a little bit more. And I'll just say, the reason why somebody questioned you was that you had not engaged them previous to this about how your program works, what are the tools that you're going to use when you have a disaster or emergency. Like, all those things probably were just maybe forgotten or didn't have time for. But I think one of your obligations, especially if you're in charge, a director, one of your obligations is to train your boss, right? And train your bosses about what you do for the community. And if they're surprised by an emergency alert notice, then and maybe that is a little bit on you, right? So I would go back and examine why they question you about sending the alert. Maybe you have to do more education of your elected leaders, right? So just a thought.
That's perfectly stated. Go ahead, Eddie.
In the guide, we talk about the different IPAWS tools and resources. Because you'll notice in here, we talk about an IPAWS alert and an IPAWS alert when you're actually going through and getting ready to send out, right, this type of communication. You have options. You have options if you want to, use probably the most robust system of, the EAS, the emergency alert system, for TV, for radio, or to go to the wireless emergency alert. There's internet-based notifications that happen. There are many things in there to educate yourself so that you can provide that education for, your leadership, as well as for, the stakeholders in your community.
And elected officials should understand the capabilities that their employees have, the systems they have. And so a great opportunity here.
But
brief them.
I would not assume that of elected leaders, right? Especially new elected leaders. Depending on where they came from, right? Assume that they don't know, right? Yeah. But again, you have an obligation to train your leader, train the boss, right? No surprises.
Yeah, and do that through your upper echelon. And again, there's a lot of lessons learned on best practices for that, and that's part of the solution, right? Confidence or confidence. The fear of inaction rather than mistakes, right? Competency that creates confidence that you need during the emergency, and not just with you, but that your senior leadership and elected officials know that we have a tool, we're going to use it should the person who I've delegated the authority to use it deems the need to use it. But confidence goes beyond fearing the interaction, right? There's a lot of other things that come into play here. So it's really about building a checklist. Eddie, you want to kind of cover the highlights here of what building that checklist should look like for an agency?
You bet. And just to cover, the points that are on the slide, but each one of these is absolutely, it's addressed in the guide. It's something to look at. These are things that, through our experience, again, real world out there, making mistakes, having successes, all the above, things that we felt were really important. Foundational knowledge. I addressed it a little bit. Understand what tools and resources are out there, and know that you don't have to use all of them at once. You can pick and choose. You can be selective based on the type of event that's happening. Understanding that, and this is something, if you've Pete's referenced this before in other talks, and I really appreciate it. It's having an emergency alerting program, having a plan in place, get it done beforehand, so that some of that decision making isn't actually decision making during the event. You're following established policy procedures. That brings confidence. Your effective message creation, there are tools and resources actually that are being developed to help you be more effective. Now, I am not an English, well, I didn't graduate with an English degree. I speak it, but I'm not perfect at it. I think sometimes we use inappropriate or unnecessary language in alerts because that's what we're comfortable with, rather than because that's the best language and words to use. Dr. Jeanette Sutton has been, she's referenced in the guide, she's been working at the request of FEMA IPAWS to identify what language works in messaging, right? What can create the response that we're looking for. So if you are just writing messages the same way that you've been writing the whole time, it's probably time to look and see what updates are needed. And then the training, education, maintenance, and for me, the student mindset.
Yeah.
If that is not on your checklist, that needs to probably be the first thing, and then middle, and then follow up at the end. Because as you're going through this process, Troy as well as Pete have a ton of experience. And I know as I work with them, that they have that student mindset, that they're always looking to improve. And that is a way to keep your program, honestly, the best that it can be.
Perfectly stated. Pete, any follow-up on the checklist?
No, I mean, it's, I think the message creation thing is one of the things that I particularly have been interested in. And just to echo Eddie's point, right? You're not writing these emergency messages for your graduate level English professor to get graded on. You're aiming these messages at a mass population who may be stressed out, in search of information, all those things. And so the simpler you make the message, right? The simpler you make the message, the easier it is for people to understand that message. The more complicated it is, they use the acronyms, jargon that emergency managers understand between themselves. Like, you can't use any of that. So I think part of this whole program is really to write effective messages, and you can write at least draft messages ahead of time, right? And do a poll with your staff about which one is most effective. You can do all sorts of different things. You can hold working groups and with the public to see what messages resonate and which ones don't. This is like all the preparation that you can do ahead of launching the alert in for real, right? You can do all this work ahead of time, and it will build your confidence to launch. So again, it's all about the preparation.
Yeah, and remember, there's ways that technology can help reduce your fear in building confidence and sending IPAWS alerts. The Unsolved Code Red tool, for an example, is an approved alerting provider. Again, we spent a lot of time, effort, and money building that easy to follow workflow, so that you can build confidence in sending those alerts. Like Pete just said, having templates pre-built around the things that are already threats and hazards in and around your community. Eddie?
Well, I was just gonna add, number one, I agree with everything, because we go with student mindset, right? What's happening? If you really are thinking through this and you're like, wow, I'm just starting, how do I get to be really confident in this? Or if you're in the mid-range, wherever you are in the spectrum of being a proficient and an effective alerting authority, do that honest self-assessment and just look to take the next step. Sometimes this can get really overwhelming, and what I don't want is for someone to be hearing us talk and be like, well, I don't have the resources, the time, or there's no way I can get there, because that's wrong. You can get there. It's just step by step. So take that next step, reach out to IPAWS and ask to learn more. But make that progression, and just step by step, you're going to become very confident and be able to send out these types of communications to the public, because your competency will grow.
Absolutely. Use it in your exercises. I wish when I was an emergency manager, I'd used my alerting tools more through measles and injects as part of the exercises we did. And I watch agencies today use them quite well. And I encourage everyone to write it into your exercise planning activities. It's critical. You know, the number one question I've seen come across the Q&A so far is, where the heck do I get this guide everybody keeps talking about? So let's talk a little bit about the guide, because you two authored the guide. This is two of the best minds in the country when it comes to just logical alerting, simple, factual, functional alerting. You know, so specific actions, a lot of the things we've talked about. Pete, you've spoken very highly of the guide, and thank you for your contribution. It is an amazing assembly of information. It's one of those things that just should be used by everyone. Again, not just IPAWS, but this is going to take and build your competence and confidence to the next level. Checklist is in there, all the documents. Hopefully you had a little fun building this out with us.
Yeah, it was a blast. And listen, less than 40 pages, right? I think that's important, right? This is not a big, thick thing. This is and I think our intent, Eddie and I, intent was to make this like a desktop resource, right? That you can quickly go through it. You can find the things that you're looking for. You can find good ideas. You can find good practices. You can find that checklist. You can find some good tips in there. But it really is a guide to get you, if you're brand new to IPAWS, or again, you have IPAWS but haven't had the ability to launch, you're afraid, you fear the launch, this is a good place to start. I think it's even a good place to go if you're an experienced IPAWS user, right? Refine your program. Look for those best practices to make your program better, more bulletproof. So yeah, the guide is really a fantastic resource. I think emergency managers will eat it up out there. I think it's really, really great.
Yeah, and what I really like about it is that it's easy to use, easy to navigate.
Yeah.
We talked about, I mean, we've had many discussions in the creation, right, of the chapter sequence. And if you just need to know something about a specific topic, you can look it up and go right to it. There's executive level, okay, this is my quick review, or if you need that more in-depth understanding, you can find it. I really think it's something that even experienced users in this are going to find valuable, because you need a reference. It's really difficult to retain all the very specific things that you might need to just know, and so having the guide will help. And hopefully it helps those that are in that paralysis stage, who are experiencing that fear, to be able to look and be like, okay, I've got this. And they can reference the guide for any specific questions, and then look to other resources if they need, additional help.
So where do we get it, right? So remember, it is a process. Continue the discussion. Send us an email at ipaws@onsolve.com. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a QR code. Or you can go to onsolve.com to download the In Control Guide to Navigating Emergency Alerts with Authority and Precision. You've watched the authors of this document over the last year. I remember one of the first questions we asked when we first conceived this document is, who's our target audience? Is it the beginning user? Is it the seasoned user? Is it the large municipality, metroplex? And the answer was everybody. And I thought, how are we going to create a guide that covers the fundamentals and the basics and foundational components, yet is still a great resource and tool for a seasoned user? And they've nailed it. These guys have absolutely nailed it. And so the guide's out there. It's for you. It's your document. We've got about a minute for Q&A. I'm going to go through Q&A here real quick, because I saw a couple that I think may be really, really good. Everybody's asking about the guide. Eddie, one question about, and let me find it here, about handsets, right? The evolution of handsets and some of the older handsets that are out there. Any concerns there? What are we watching as that technology evolves, and yet we still have some of those laggards out there?
In a 30-second response, right, or less.
Yes, please.
Handsets are developing. The wireless emergency alert has been a piece of technology that we have seen develop in real time. We have, though, now IPAWS has been setting up additional updates to the system that make it so much more accurate. If you have devices that are 2019 or newer, they are the WIA 3.0. They have device-based geofencing, which is a whole fun other topic that we can go into. But the bottom line is technology is advancing, and you should become more and more confident in the system. And I would just invite you to learn more about that. We talk about it in the guide specific, because it's important for you to understand all those nuances.
Perfectly said. And so, Pete, you've written quite a few papers on technology and innovation for public safety and emergency management. I mean, IPAWS isn't done, right? This is an evolving process along with your training. Any comments and closing comments there?
Yeah, I think Eddie said it's only getting better, right? I think, the FEMA IPAWS team over the last 12, 14 years, in its evolution from, the purely civil defense EAS kind of thing to what it is today has been earth-shattering, right? And the United States is one of the very few countries that has a national alerting platform. There are countries all over the world that want to get what we have when it comes to this. So it's very special. And there's more to come on IPAWS, right? There's more to come on IPAWS. And I think you're going to be very surprised at what the IPAWS team has in store for how we're going to use and receive alerts in the future. The very close-in future, right? But again, I think back to the original thing. If you don't have IPAWS, you can't take advantage of the system, right? So if you don't have it, reach out to through your state to the FEMA region, through Eddie Batola, right? Go talk to Eddie. He'll figure it out. More work for Eddie. But don't sit back and just say, hey, this is not my problem. Somebody else will do this for me. I think as emergency managers, we have a moral and ethical obligation to save lives. And this is the premier life-saving tool for emergency managers.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That was amazing. We are at time. If you asked a question and we weren't able to answer it, we'll definitely follow up with you. But I want to thank our panelists, Mr. Pete Gaynor, Mr. Eddie Batola. I'm among the experts, and I couldn't be more honored. And thank you for joining today. The participants, remember to watch for the follow-up email in the coming days. You can also visit onsolve.com for more information. So go get the guide, get in control, and become confident and competent with your alerting. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day and stay safe.